Hi, Kate.
Hi.
So it's my big pleasure to interview you for my blog. And my first question is, what is a good musical composition for you?
Good musical composition. Yeah, that's a really deep question, deep and with many layers. Um, well, I think that um, the best answer that I can give is that it's a composition has a sincerity to it in the situation of the piece. That there's a sincerity to the aesthetic and a sincerity to the form and structure or the technique for which the piece represents, whether it's in one idiom or another, or whether it's improvised music or whether it's written music. There has to be an authenticity to the heart, to the core of the piece. And it's whether it's a simple piece or a complex piece, it's the authenticity which is the thing that speaks the most. That's the cairn, the heart of what I search for in a composition for myself and for others.
And maybe was the last piece which you heard, which brings that element?
The last piece that brings that element of
Of what you heard as listener.
yeah. Well, I mean, I listen to a lot of music and I attend a lot of concerts. And I mean, I'm currently working on this project at the moment with it's a very different situation. It's initiated by a harp player, Beata Loonstra, who's a Dutch harp player, and she has a residency in a church in Amsterdam, where she has set up a situation where she's invited musicians every day to spend 3 hours in the church where visitors come and tell a story, and the musicians then interpret the story and create a spontaneous composition based on the story. I'm one of the musicians. So yesterday and next Sunday and last Sunday, I was also there for 3 hours. And this concept and this idea of the piece speaks to everybody on a very different sort of level. So it sort of breaks down the hierarchy of the concert hall, brings everyone right up close to the musicians, and also is a two-way conversation between the public and the musicians, rather than just being the musicians telling the public what they should listen for. So somehow I'm very attracted to this project and this concept. This concept of bringing people closer, this concept of breaking down hierarchy. So I guess that's my most recent interest and an idea which comes from a very pure place and has a very authentic background to the concept.
Mm-hmm. And looking just if you like Kate Moore, look on yourself as Kate Moore, right? What do you think? What is your musical signature or musical ideas which you're trying to develop over the time again and again?
Well, I mean, I'm constantly searching. In every piece, I'm searching for new questions, or every piece answers a different question. A lot of the questions that I have sort of relate to the questions that I've developed over the years with regards to, well, music theory and technique, performance practice of my own training, of sort of being told along the way what things are, and finding in myself that I question this and taking those statements and looking at it under the microscope for myself and thinking about it and thinking, is what I'm being told really the case?
Can
And
you give me an example?
Oh, sure, of course. Scales. Western music theory. Well, I spent many hours practicing scales as a cellist as a child. And I was constantly asking myself, why are these intervals more important than other intervals? Why do we do this particular sequence when it could be something else? So I think about the symbolism of intervals, for example, which then takes me to the symbolism of equal temperament, and then breaking that down to think, well, if equal temperament is this, where does equal temperament come from? And then considering all the other temperaments, and then considering that, well, essentially it's an approximation of a Pythagorean scale. And then the Pythagorean scale has these difficulties when you work with large numbers of musicians, but if you work with one musician, it works brilliantly. And also with regards to instruments and how instruments are constructed in order to embrace various technologies such as temperament, for example. That's the most fundamental. That like a piano is built so as to sort of compensate for the idiosyncrasies with tuning systems, but that supports equal temperament specifically. So yeah, I mean, I guess in a way I come from a very technical background, but that technical background also speaks to me on an emotional level, as having been a musician for my entire life, and the sort of the memories I have from that, the emotional attachment that I have to certain situations and experiences, and sort of reanalyzing it and trying to reshape it so that I can kind of find myself. I find myself through music. I guess.
So it's a little bit always challenging traditions, right?
I guess, but for myself more than.
Yes. I understand.
It's sort of like it's an inquiry, rather than sort of standing up and making a manifesto of like, we must never work with equal temperament ever again because it's out of tune. Yeah. It's more like, how does it make sense for me? Or how does it not make sense for me?
Yes. So it's like internal challenging. So Kate Moore constantly internally challenging herself by asking questions of traditions, right?
For sure. It's searching for something. I mean, it's like research. I dig deeper and deeper and try and understand it better with more clarity.
Yes. And when I saw your pieces, I somehow saw them in the World Minimal Music Festival. It was the first encounter when I listen or watch, let's say more. I would say for these pieces, I would say it's more appropriate word to watch or experience. Then I saw you in the first like first hour, let's say not direct but indirect encounter was in this festival, in Minimalist Festival. Do you attribute yourself to minimal music or not?
That's a very good question. I find myself, I have a sort of an adverse reaction to the word minimalism. I think, well, I'm trying to figure this out for myself as well.
Challenges, right?
That's my very pure sort of emotional reaction to the word. I don't like the word minimalism, and from my personal perspective, I feel like it's a label which is very very generalizing label that misses a lot of the nuance of the facets of so-called minimalism, like tradition, where it comes from, who's writing it, and in what context. I certainly feel like the word minimalism points to a certain period in history, to a certain period, a certain place, a certain number of composers. And then if you say minimalism, then everything's linked to that time, that place, those composers. Which I guess in one way, I am linked to it through generations, through teachers, through place, through how I've been brought up. So it is my language, and it is a heritage that I inherit. But I also have an other side, which is that I'm interested in other music musics and other music traditions, which somehow defines it better, and that's more about what I'm interested in.
Yes, yes.
And especially with regards to, I mean, I consider myself to be interested in music theory from its progression from the beginning rather than from a particular place in time. And I see minimalism in context from the beginning. I see what minimalism has taken from history and from other music traditions. And it's a language, those languages, the languages of cyclical structures, for example, of placing cyclical structures in time and melodic phrases, very much related to, for example, Indian music theory or Arabic music theory, or I mean, there's any number of folk traditions that uses repetition. And I feel much closer to the folk. I try to find the folk music traditions of my heritage as well, and that's sort of also what comes through in my music. So with regards to the word minimalism, I would say that I'm uncomfortable with it.
Good. And I saw in this in our first indirect encounter, I saw that in your pieces there are multimedia. So I see the piece where it was video, and I see the piece there was some installations on the stage, right? I should explain there is some ice which is melting, and then you collect from that with very super sensitive microphones. So that, and therefore my question is, when you first time start using multimedia, and why? What was triggered to use multimedia in your pieces? Right?
It always comes from the perspective of sound and a concept. So for example, the piece that you're talking about was called Clepsydra, which is a piece, Clepsydra means a water clock. It's an ancient, well, water clocks were used to keep time in antiquity. And I found this a really fascinating thing to think about with regards to be honest, I wondered whether clepsydras of antiquity were also sound devices, as we have clock towers with bells. I considered the possibility that the sound of the bells came from the original clepsydra, as falling water in ceramic material makes a bell sound also. And I found that a fascinating thing to think about. So I wanted to create like a water clock that was a sound piece, a sound object. And that was sort of the foundation for the piece, the beginning of the piece. So it was the sound of water falling upon ceramic that sparked the idea for the piece itself. And then the piece itself is about the structure of time. And the durations of the phrases and the rhythm is sort of more or less based on the timing of the movement of stars. So as stars appear on the horizon, it's sort of my attempt is to tune into that and then create a structure around it.
And in which work you start using videos as well?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't use video so much. It's something that interests me, but it's not really my skill set. I mean, I think video speaks very powerfully if done in the right way. But to be honest, when I use multimedia, it's more or less nearly all, it pretty much always has a sound component, and it's the sound component that interests me, and it becomes like an instrument in the piece.
Yes, just can you explain or give an example?
Yeah, for sure. I have a piece called Days in Nature, which is for a sort of Sinfonia setup. It was written for Asko Schoenberg Ensemble. And in this piece, in the score, I had to include a machine. A machine had to turn on because I wrote the piece on an artist residency in the bush, and it was very peaceful, and I was listening to the sounds of nature, the birds, but it was an artist residency. There were other studios, and at 9 o'clock in the morning, a saw would turn on every day. So a mechanical device, which is a sort of a human intervention. And so the juxtaposition of nature versus industry from a sound perspective was the concept of the piece. So I wrote the score sort of in this very organic structure of sort of like phrases that are expanding like trees, branches of tree trunks, and sort of very organic growth, sort of circling around each other and growing like a forest. And then at a certain point in the piece, a machine has to turn on to represent the human intervention, particularly a saw cutting down the trees. And in the process of producing the piece for performance, to the actuality of having a machine in the piece sent me on a journey of searching for machines. And then I found an artist, a visual artist based in The Hague called Peter van Loon, who made music machines. So he's a sculptor. He makes sound sculptures, which are machines themselves. So I thought that was a brilliant kind of situation to employ his music machines in my piece, where I was searching for a machine. So therefore, his sculptures become part of the piece. So it came from the concept of searching for a machine to represent this concept of human invention in a natural world. That then I find sound sculptures to represent that.
Yes, but these sculptures, right, was so you shoot a video and then put on the video on the stage as well, right? That was the idea. And yes, correctly understand? So,
no. Oh.
So you said that there is we talk about video. You said that you always talk video regarding videos. You use videos which has some sound elements, right?
Oh, well, no. What I was saying is that I don't use video that much. But if I use multimedia, which is usually sound sculpture,
okay,
then it has a sound component. Yeah.
So you use sound sculptures, right? You just put sculptures on stage. Okay, got it.
Yeah, sound sculptures mostly. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, interesting. And what triggers you? What was the first piece?
The first piece.
Yes, where you use this
with sound sculptures.
Yes.
Okay. I have to go back a long way, because in a way I think I've been doing it since I began composing, because I am also a visual artist and work in both fields. For a long time I did, even when I was a child. So yeah, it comes a little bit with using electronic music and sound sculpture sort of come together, because by making an electronic piece, I have to have a sound source.
Yes.
And in order to find sort of an original sound source, then I make an object which has its own sound. Yes. And then sample it and create it. But then it sort of merged into not just the electronic piece through speakers, but also to have this object in the space as well.
Yes.
So I guess the first sound installation I made was in 1999, I think, on a piece called Sentience, which was a collaboration with a visual artist. This was an electronic piece based on the resonant frequencies of a tam-tam. And so I sampled the tam-tam and used these frequencies in order to make the tam-tam vibrate in real time, live. So the tam-tam was set up on a speaker in the middle of the space, of the gallery space. And then I would play my composition into the tam-tam so that the tam-tam would vibrate, and we put water on it, and then there was a video installation reflected on the water, so you could see it move.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was I guess that was my first official piece using sound sculpture and sound and sculpture together. And then from there I do it regularly. My major work for my undergrad, my honors degree, was to create an interactive sound installation in a gallery space where I set up 8 columns of speakers, and then audience members would come to see it, and there was a microphone set up, and I would ask them the question, where is their space? And then they would tell me a story about where their space was, and the story would go into the composition. So through the microphone, it would circle on a loop, sort of spiraling, getting softer and softer and softer, and then eventually disappear. But then all the stories were doing this spiraling thing. So it was sort of a real-time composition as well as a sculpture.
Yes. And what is your way of composing? Okay, with what you start, how you start, and what are the biggest stages which are you going through?
How do I start the composition? Yeah, it always comes from like an idea of like I'm quite childlike, I guess. It's like playing. I'm like, I wonder what happens if, or I wonder what that means, or something. And then I circle around it for a little bit, and then I go on a journey, and like I read everything that I can about a certain thing, like, I don't know, something. And it just becomes like an adventure. I go on an adventure and then start to build up things. And sometimes it's the music comes right at the very end. So I have to sort of build it up and build it up and build it up, and then it's bubbling, and then I have a piece to write, and then I write the piece, and that's what it's about. Sort of like the tree growing and then flower at the end of it, something.
Yes.
So yeah.
Can you illustrate your piece, for example, explaining how the process with your work? One of your works where you used porcelain. It was Cassini suit. Can you go me through what kind of stages you went there as composer?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is a long and really cool journey. It began with Clepsydra, my piece Clepsydra that I wrote for Asko Schoenberg Ensemble with a water clock. And I was fascinated by the way in which water acts upon a ceramic surface. So then I started, well, actually for Clepsydra, I wanted to build a Clepsydra out of porcelain. So I designed it and then asked a porcelain maker to make it for me. And so he did, but he misinterpreted my dimensions as I indicated radius, but he interpreted that as diameter. So all the pieces were tiny where they should have been bigger. And of course, the bigger they are, the more resonant they are. So these little tiny bells were very high pitched and almost had no resonance. They were too small. So it was a little bit of a mistake. So from there, well, I used these little pieces that I'd designed and commissioned someone to make for me, to make little sculptures to explore how I could make it work anyway, because it was made. And somehow in that process, it was picked up on. Someone saw my work, and it just so happened that this person, Ranti Chan, who's on the board of Gaudiamus Festival, which is a big new music festival in Holland, is also the director of the European Ceramic Werk Center. So that was a very coincidental connection. So he invited me as a composer to be artist in residence at the Europees Ceramic Werk Center, EKWC, to do a residency and to make my own instruments. And at the same time, Slagwerk Den Haag, the percussion group The Hague, was also really interested in my inquiry into ceramic because it was written for Asko Schoenberg Ensemble, and Fedor Tönnissen is the director of both percussion group The Hague and Asko Schoenberg Ensemble. So he thought that it would be really interesting to develop these ideas in a piece for percussionists. So they commissioned me. Europees Ceramic Werk Center and Slagwerk Den Haag commissioned me to explore this, and so therefore I spent 3 months in the workshop building, like learning how to build porcelain, and I built my own instruments, and then created a 60-minute piece using these instruments. So I made a series of small pieces which sort of represented different acoustic shapes to explore how resonance works. So I made tubes, I made plates, I made bowls, I made shards, and every shape has a completely different resonance, and that was a fascinating way to explore the way in which resonance works in a surface.
Yes,
yeah.
It's like you started with residence, right? Then was a commission, then you build your instruments, and when you start thinking about composition itself, right? It's 60 minutes piece, right? What was that moment?
Well, yeah, because I'm building up the composition as I'm making the pieces. It's very much based on the limitations of the instruments, and I have to learn how to make sound from the instruments in the best way.
Okay, good. So it's the first stage. You made instruments, right? You play with that. You understand what you can collect and what kind of sound you can create from ceramics, and then only you start composing, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, the composition part is in the final stages of the project. Yeah.
Yes, and the main idea is just to show what those instruments is capable of, right?
No. The concept of the composition itself is to create a ritual space that explores the. I mean, I'm coming from a sort of historical inquiry into the clepsydra, and the sort of the symbolism of music and sound and water and time. So the concept of water, time, ritual and symbolism become the essence of what the composition is. So it's a ritual space.
Right. A ritual space made from those ceramic instrument sounds. Okay, got it. And then the compositional idea, when you came to that particular,
it's very pure. It's a combination of time, keeping time. So polyrhythmic cycles is essentially the underground, the underlying thing. It's a clock, literally.
right.
It goes back to the clepsydra. It's a clock. I'm dividing time in a metric way. And then the other instruments that I make are water pipes. It's like a recorder with an open end with no holes. It's just a pipe, literally. That's played. You play the pitch in a like a vase of water. So as it goes lower into, then the pitch also goes higher. Just have to think about that. So there's a recorder player, and she plays these very mysterious little chants on water pipe, and they represent non-metric time. They represent the feeling of time, because you have a melody. It's a sequence of notes, but the duration flows according to the feel.
Got it.
So the percussionists are keeping this strict time, and the recorder player is playing with the flow of time.
Right. Got it. And now I would like to answer a question which was asked by Simon Steen Andersen, which was asked to all composers. What do you fear as composers the most?
That's a really good question. I fear nothing. I'm fearless. Statement. As a composer, I fear, well, in all honesty, I fear not being able to meet my deadlines, because I get so caught up in the piece that I forget that time is passing. It's a hell of a lot of work to write a piece, and I feel like sometimes I feel overwhelmed by how much work I have to do in order to meet the deadline. That's my biggest fear, literally, in a very practical way. I fear my life passing. as I'm writing notes in isolation, my life is also slipping down clepsydra. And time passes so fast. I fear missing out on the vitality of like the experience of living and life. I think that's my biggest fear, actually.
Good, good. And next question from Francois Charan. Why do you still compose?
Why do I still compose? Well, it's not really a question because it's just part of who I am. I eat and breathe and compose. It's my language. It's my mode of expression. I'm much more at home in creating a sound space, a language, a story through sound than I am in other areas of my life, like in words. Words don't come so naturally to me, but music comes more naturally to me, I guess. It's just part of me. It's my way of reflecting myself, of discovering who I am, of feeling things, of finding things, and researching things. Yeah.
Yes. And next question: if you're looking back on yourself, right? How your music changed in the last 10 years?
Yeah, well, I think it becomes, certainly the style has changed it's very slowly, a slow evolution, because every piece leads from one to the next. I guess I'm going more and more into sort of free-flowing music, which is in a way the opposite of like the pieces that you know of mine, of very sort of minimalist, with like very clear structure. I sort of break down the clear structure to the opposite, where it sounds very free-flowing. Mm-hmm. There's an underlying structure, but the underlying structure is more hidden somehow.
Yes.
But yeah, I guess I'm interested in free flow that also makes sense. It has syntax and grammar. Yeah.
And you as composer and as a musician, what do you think, or what kind of changes you observed in the last 25 years in the music scene, or let's say in this century, right? How it's changed music landscape and music?
Yeah, well, I think it's changed enormously, even just in 10 or 15 years. In my lifetime, I think it's like the biggest change in music in centuries, probably. Technology is a huge part of that. Technology has exploded. Whereas, I mean, even when I began, it was still sort of difficult. I was the first class in my school to work with digital technology. Before that, it was analog. So the class before me still worked with splicing tape. I didn't ever work with splicing tape. It ended with my class. But even when I began, I was using an ADAT. It was backing up in real time and with very small amount of memory on these very slow computers. And now computers, like everybody has a laptop, and like everybody has access to all this very advanced technology, which works very fast and has huge capacity. So therefore, technology is embraced. Like it's everybody's language. So that's a huge part of what's happened in the last 20 years. I think that it's become everyday. Technology is everyday, is accessible to everybody very easily, and the reliance on technology has also become sort of integral. Like, even when I began, we were sort of encouraged to write with ink on paper. Still, now nearly all the students that I have or have worked with immediately work with MIDI on a software program. It's not even a question.
Yes.
And I think another big explosion, which I hope keeps exploding, is sort of like breaking down the hierarchical structures of previous generations, embracing, allowing diverse, diverse language, and also the acceptance of women. Of course, it's taken way too long for that to be realized, and that to be embraced. It's still very slow, but the discussion is there, and there are huge developments in that way. So getting rid of misogyny in the arts, in musical arts and composition, is a big one. It's got to go as fast as possible, and also embracing or realizing privilege and allowing those who are not as privileged in to have a voice, to give voice to those from other perspectives, and not just the status quo or the normal accepted values. So I think it's a much more, it's a warmer scene now. It's more embracing. It's less about us and them, and more about it's all us together. And that's really opening so many doors of possibilities, and so many ideas, so many thoughts, so many different perspectives, which gives us a more complete picture of the human experience.
Yes, got it. And you mentioned technology, and what is the most important technological artifact for you?
Well,
hardware,
yeah.
Software.
Oh yeah. That's a very good question, because I sort of have a tendency to try and stay, because it's so accessible. It's also so, I sort of feel a bit of a slave to technology. So I try to avoid technology as much as possible. I have my laptop, and that's like, that comes with me everywhere. That's my bread and butter, my laptop. Without my laptop, I would have a difficult time functioning. I mean, I make my scores on a software program. I mean, I write on paper still, but my scores are always presented on a software program. And let me think. Technology. I have
on Macs, or
you mean Mac or Mac's MSP?
Macs.
Oh yeah. So I have software. I have, my palette is Mac's MSP, Logic Pro, and Ableton Live. They're my 3 programs. Wait, is that right? And Sibelius, of course.
Yes. And
so,
you only use, or you can code as well, or you program your own versions, or?
Well, with Mac's MSP, I make my own environments, I guess, my own things. What do they call patches? I make my own patches. Yeah, I don't use pre-made patches. That's the fun of it. It's always about like what sound can I make with this, and how can I use it? Yeah, no, and also with Logic Pro and Ableton Live, on occasion I use the presets, samples, but for the most part I make my own samples as well.
Yes, got it.
So yeah, so with electronic music, it's my own sounds.
Yes, got it. And in some pieces, I understand you use as well as recorders, right, or sensitive microphones, right?
Yes, I do. That's specifically for that particular performance of Space Junk in the World Minimal Music Festival, and that was a huge production. It was like a 90-minute concert piece or something, with a number of my pieces leading up to this very big piece, and then there was the melting ice sound sculpture. And then with samples, glass harmonica samples, and then with the Space Junk piece too, that was with sort of like a very big electroacoustic installation. So it was like 12 channels or something around like the concert hall. Yeah. So yeah, I in this case, the sensitive microphones. I design what I want. I say that this is the sound I want. This is the sculpture I want, and then the production team builds it for me. So it was produced by Asko Schoenberg Ensemble at the Musikgebouw.
Got it. And what do you think? What are the biggest changes regarding audience? Is it becoming younger? Is it becoming different? Is it changing or not? Or is it disappearing?
Yeah. Well, I don't see the audience disappearing. Every concert that I am involved in is a full house, always. Whether it's big, I mostly work in the Musikgebouw. That's my main concert hall, and that's usually more or less full. During COVID times, just about everything has been booked out very far in advance because of the limited number of people that have been allowed. That's a new situation because in the past I found myself having to kind of advertise the concert a lot in order to let everybody know so that they can come. But now I don't even bother because it's already sold out before I even know that it's been put up. Which in one way is a good thing. That's how concerts should be, that they should just be on and people come, and you shouldn't have to go out and sort of like rally for getting more audience. It should just be an event that people know where it is and go because they get something from it, that it gives them soul food. So yeah. Like with regard, I don't really see a change in the sorts of audiences. It still, to me, seems more like an older audience. Of course, we always like to bring in young people, and there's a lot of sort of promotion for that, to bring young people into the concert hall. But to be honest, I embrace it as it is because there are many reasons why things happen the way they do, why a certain type of concert appeals more to a certain generation than another. It's partly to do with time, how a young person's life is structured. They don't have time to go to a concert at 8 o'clock because they probably have other things to do. Would much rather go to like a club on Friday night or something, because it's also a social event, and that makes sense.
Yes,
it makes sense.
It's a good. And what do you think? Where is music landscape is heading? What's to your mind? What's the future trends? Right? Where are we going?
Well, I think that it's a very open space now, with a lot of different possibilities and a lot of. I think it's like one of maybe perhaps the most creative time ever, where there's in a way no limitations. So we're never short of creative people who want to say something. So our art form is not disappearing. It will not ever disappear. It's growing and growing and growing. And I think whereas maybe in past generations there was much more an emphasis on hierarchy of like there's the top dog and everything trickles down. We're not really. I don't think that works anymore. I don't think it's interesting anymore. It's much more sort of the cyclical circle structure of like how everyone's related to each other in all sorts of ways, and it's very organic. This organic environment, and I think that's beautiful. That's something that's developing, that's new, that's different from before. I don't think I would ever want to go back to the hierarchical structure of the top dog that trickles down. I don't think that's necessary or healthy or in any way good.
Yes, and the last question regarding in our first part of the interview is, what do you think? What is the role of new music in society?
New music is a creative outlet. Everyone is burning with creativity, and they're just exploding to let it out. It's about connecting with people through creativity, through invention, through new ideas, through inquiry, through exploration, through color. The music is color. It's like color for the soul. We see color with our eyes, but the soul feels color through music. There's a connection. It's music is very, well, I should say frequency is very powerful. Frequency, it has a binding quality and brings people together, no matter what we do, no matter what we compose, no matter what we perform, no matter what our instruments are, no matter what our technology is. Frequency is there, and it connects, and we'll always sort of utilize it. It's a resource. It's an essence, like water is an essence.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.